I didn't get a Christmas bonus this year. HR got theirs, wrapped in shiny boxes with ribbons, announced at the company town hall like they'd just cured cancer. Me? Nothing. Not even a fake thank you card. And that would have stung on its own, except I had already prepared a different kind of gift. One that would make them wish they had given me more than silence. Before I get into it, if you like stories where the underdog actually wins, hit that like button. Subscribe. Whatever you can do. Because this isn't just about a petty slight. This is about receipts, leverage, and $120 million. The holiday town hall was always supposed to be cheesy. You know the drill: bad eggnog, too much Mariah Carey blasting through a rented PA, and an ugly sweater competition nobody wanted to win. But this year, the CEO had outdone himself. He had wheeled out a Christmas tree taller than my apartment and positioned the HR director right in front of it. The lights dimmed, and suddenly, cue the applause, special appreciation packages were handed out to HR one by one. Gift boxes, thick envelopes, a round of applause from executives who couldn't be bothered to learn the names of the analysts who actually kept the company alive. I was sitting in the third row, jaw tight, hands folded. I had closed a refinancing deal in Q3 that saved this company $18 million in debt costs. I was the one who rewired our forecasting system so it could catch revenue leaks before they became quarterly surprises. My team ran the data pipelines that fed the reports investors drooled over, but I was invisible. Not overlooked, erased. Then came the kicker. After the applause, the CEO leaned into the mic and said, "This year, bonuses will be selectively distributed. Not everyone fits the collaborative culture we're trying to build." And his eyes swept past me like I was gum under his Italian leather shoe. Collaborative culture was code. Code for, you didn't play politics, you didn't kiss the right ring, you didn't belong. HR got their packages. I got a performance improvement plan slid into my inbox 2 hours later. Merry Christmas! But here's the thing. While they were busy rewarding each other for team spirit, I was building something much colder, much sharper. For months, I had been archiving evidence, memos, payment trails, edits to bonus pool allocations that didn't match any policy. I had screen captures of holiday wellness, reimbursements that weren't wellness at all. I had time-stamped approvals routed through HR at midnight, pushed by the CFO's side channel. I had proof, and when you work in strategic finance, you don't just keep proof, you know how to use it. That night, while everyone else lined up for selfies by the Christmas tree, I slipped away. My badge still had after-hours access, and my footsteps echoed down the corridor like I was the only one alive in that building, which in a way I was. Everyone else was blinded by the glow of corporate Christmas lights. I was seeing the shadows. I didn't walk toward the lobby. I didn't walk toward the parking garage. I walked toward legal, toward the part of the building where glass doors separated us from silence, where one conversation could set fire to everything they thought they owned. And as I stood there, hand hovering over the handle, one thought kept me warm. They thought they had taken everything from me, but they didn't know I was holding the kind of gift no ribbon could ever wrap. When people ask me how I knew something was wrong, I don't say instinct. I say math. Numbers don't lie, but people do, especially when those people sit in corner offices with their names on glass doors. My role was Strategic Finance Director. Translation: I was the one who made the numbers behave when executives couldn't. I built the models, reconciled the ledgers, tracked vendor payments, and stress-tested scenarios. If money flowed through this company, I saw it. That meant I also saw when it trickled somewhere it shouldn't. At first it was small, an entry buried inside a cost center labeled Holiday Wellness. Cute name. The line item looked like reimbursed stipends, yoga classes, fitness memberships, mental health programs. Nothing unusual on the surface, but the amounts didn't add up. Who spends $49,800 on holiday yoga sessions in a single week? I flagged it in my notes, highlighted it, and moved on. Then another appeared. Same cost center, different vendor. Payment split just under $50,000 again. Not once, not twice, half a dozen times. If you've ever worked in a finance, you know why that number matters. 50K was the threshold that triggered board-level review. Keep it under and it sailed through approvals like a paper boat. I asked accounting for vendor contracts. Silence. I asked procurement. We'll get back to you. Weeks passed and those invoices kept showing up, rubber-stamped at midnight. That's when I started running my own scripts. I had coded a bot for reconciliations, a little side project that scraped timestamp logs and matched approvals with system activity. Within days, patterns lit up like fireworks. Same IP addresses approving across multiple accounts, user credentials logged in after hours, and this one made me sit back in my chair. The HR director's login routing invoices for vendors she shouldn't have had any contact with. Still, I didn't say a word. Not to my boss, not to colleagues, not even to my team. Silence is armor in places like this. If you make noise too early, you get marked as difficult, and difficult people don't last. Instead, I document every login, every invoice, every suspicious approval. I created what I called the shadow ledger, a mirror record of transactions that weren't supposed to exist. Meanwhile, the company culture rotted from the top down. The CEO preached about family values while berating staff behind closed doors. HR handed out performance plans like candy canes to anyone who didn't clap hard enough at town halls. And bonuses? They weren't earned. They were gifted to insiders like party favors. By Q2, it wasn't just about favoritism. It was theft. Bonuses weren't shrinking because of poor performance. They were shrinking because someone was siphoning the pool. The same pool that was supposed to reward analysts who pulled 80-hour weeks, engineers who kept systems alive at 3 a.m., and sales teams who carried the quarter on their backs. The pot was being bled dry through fake vendors and funneled back to the very people who decided who got selectively rewarded. And still, the company smiled for press releases. The day I realized just how deep it went, I was running a quarterly variance analysis. Simple task. Compare forecasted expenses to actuals. But buried inside the variance notes was a comment, left open in the system, probably by mistake. Push through HR. No noise. No initials, just a traceable user ID. When I pulled the log, it mapped back to the CFO's admin account. That was the moment the game changed. A rogue HR director can be handled. A corrupt CFO, that's the bloodstream of the company. I remember leaning back in my chair, staring at that comment. Around me, the office buzzed with holiday chatter. Secret Santa lists, cheap tinsel taped to cubicles, the smell of reheated potluck casseroles. But I couldn't hear any of it. In that moment, it was just me, the numbers and the realization that I was staring at a machine designed to bleed people dry while keeping them grateful for crumbs. I didn't storm into anyone's office. I didn't send a furious email. That's what they expected. No, I started writing. Notes, logs, timestamps. I mirrored every spreadsheet, copied every PDF, exported every approval history into encrypted vaults. And every night, when I left the building, I walked past that Christmas tree in the lobby. Lights flickering, ornaments shining. It looked beautiful, but I knew the truth. The roots were rotting. And when rot spreads, the whole thing eventually collapses. If you've never been put on a PIP right before Christmas, let me tell you, it's not about improvement. It's about humiliation. The email landed in my inbox with the subject line, Performance Improvement Plan. Effective immediately. HR speak for, we want you gone, but we'd like to make it look like your fault. I opened the attachment, and there it was. 3 pages of vague accusations. Not collaborative. Resistance to feedback. Concerns about alignment with company culture. Nowhere did it mention that I'd saved the company millions. Nowhere did it note that my models had prevented 2 near disasters with investors. Instead, it read like a script, written by someone who had never once sat in on the actual work. When I asked for specifics, HR gave me smiles so sharp they could cut glass. We just need you to be a team player. Translation: shut up, stop asking questions, and clap when we tell you to. But here's the thing: they underestimated me. They thought I'd crumble under the gaslight. They thought I'd spend sleepless nights rewriting self-assessments and begging for approval. Instead, I mirrored everything. Every meeting, notes, timestamps, BCCs to a secure vault, every one-on-one. I'd walk in with my phone on voice memo, disguised as taking notes. Every document they slid across the table, I'd scan it, save it, and log the metadata. They were trying to trap me, but what they didn't realize was that every move they made just added fuel to my fire. The worst moment came in December, right before the holiday break. I walked into a meeting where the CFO and HR director were huddled over a slide deck. As soon as I sat down, the deck changed, like magic. Gone were the earlier drafts showing the bonus pool allocations, the ones I'd seen get slashed overnight. In their place, a clean version, sanitized and polished. They didn't know I already had screenshots of the earlier draft, with time-stamped metadata. They didn't know I had mirrored the approvals routed through HR at 2:13 a.m., signed with the CFO's digital credentials. They thought they were rewriting the story. What they didn't know was that I'd already written the first draft, and mine had the receipts. At one point, a colleague pulled me aside. "Look," he whispered, "you're on thin ice. Stop poking. It's not worth it." Maybe he meant well, but what he didn't realize is that I wasn't poking. I was building. Brick by brick, document by document, I was laying the foundation of something that could crush the very people who thought they were untouchable. Meanwhile, the gaslighting continued. HR coaches called me difficult. The CEO casually dropped hints in meetings that not everyone is long for this culture. They wanted me to feel isolated, disposable, like the only option left was to quit quietly and fade away. But every time they tightened the noose, I tightened my grip on the evidence. I started calling my vault the black box. Like the flight recorder in a plane crash, it held everything: the logs, the emails, the shadow ledger of phantom vendors, and midnight approvals. If they were going to take me down, my black box was going to take them with me. And then came the final insult. HR called me into a coaching session where they handed me a glossy NDA. A holiday goodwill gesture, they called it. Sign here, accept a token severance. Walk away quietly. I didn't even touch the pen. Instead, I smiled, thanked them for their time, and walked out with the folder still closed. They thought silence meant a defeat. What they didn't understand was that silence was my weapon. Because while they were laughing over catered lunches and congratulating each other on protecting the culture, I was sitting on proof that could burn the entire house down. And the best part, they had no idea how close I was to lighting the fuse. When people imagine corporate fraud, they picture some Ocean's 11 operation. Secret vaults, burner phones, money wired to offshore accounts. The truth? It's almost boring. Paperwork, bad spreadsheets, lazy habits. It's people so certain of their power that they don't even bother to cover their tracks. That's exactly what I found. Let me break it down, because you don't need an MBA to follow this trail. The slush fund ran through a cost center called Holiday Wellness. Sounds harmless, right? A pool set aside for yoga stipends, meditation apps, maybe a few therapy sessions. It gave executives the perfect cover story. We care about mental health. Here's how it actually worked. Step 1. Fake vendors. Shell companies popped up with names like Sunrise Wellness LLC and Blue Horizon Consulting. No websites, no staff on LinkedIn, just mailbox addresses and strip malls 3 states away. Step 2. Split invoices. Each invoice landed at $49,800, conveniently below the $50K threshold that triggered an automatic board review. Multiple invoices per week, different shells, same format. Step 3. Midnight approvals. The system logs showed HR accounts pushing approvals at 2 a.m., always from the same IP range, always routed through the CFO's admin credentials. Step 4, kickback loop. The payments were coded as wellness reimbursements, but the money circled back in the form of holiday appreciation gifts and retention bonuses. In plain English, they siphoned cash out of the bonus pool, laundered it through fake vendors, and funneled it back to themselves. And it wasn't just bonuses. My shadow ledger showed RSU allocations rewritten after the board had signed off, option backdating disguised as administrative adjustments, even charitable donations routed through nonprofits that didn't exist. It was theft dressed up as generosity. The smoking gun came almost by accident. One night, while I was running reconciliation scripts, an email slipped into my inbox, misaddressed. It was a PDF attachment titled HR Wellness Adjustments, Confidential. The sender? A junior analyst who had meant to send it to the CFO's private address. Inside was a table, rows of payments marked Wellness Disbursement, except the recipient names weren't employees. They were vendor accounts, and next to each one was a note in red text. Push through HR, no noise. It matched the metadata I already had. Dates, amounts, routing paths. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was proof. From there, the rest fell into place like dominoes. I pulled ACH batch files showing payments flagged as holiday bonuses landing in shell accounts. I cross-referenced login timestamps with badge swipes, HR approving transactions from accounts, while their physical badges showed them out of the building. I captured Slack messages where the CFO typed, HR packages must clear. Do not escalate. Handle internally. They thought they were clever. They thought the company would never question wellness spending during a pandemic hangover. They thought auditors would glance, nod, and move on. But auditors don't see what insiders see, and insiders don't usually keep receipts this clean. By the time I was done, my black box wasn't just a vault. It was a roadmap of fraud, step by step, time-stamped, cross-verified, airtight. I didn't go to bed that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the city lights bleeding through the blinds, staring at my laptop screen, folder after folder, file after file, lined up like bullets in a chamber, and I knew exactly where to aim them. The next morning, I met with outside counsel. I slid a flash drive across the table. He plugged it in, scrolled, and within minutes leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. "This," he said quietly, "isn't just misconduct. This is felony-level fraud." He asked me if I was ready to take the next step, to file with the SEC, to go to the DOJ, to hand over the black box and let the machine do the rest. Was I ready? I thought about the Christmas tree in the lobby, the gift boxes handed out with fake smiles, the CEO's voice dripping with arrogance as he said, not everyone fit the culture. And I thought about the silence of every employee who'd been denied their bonus, their raise, their promotion, the silence of people who'd been gaslit into believing they weren't enough. I wasn't just ready. I was done waiting, so I nodded. And just like that, the fuse was lit. Lighting the fuse wasn't about grand speeches or dramatic confrontations. It was paperwork. Quiet, careful paperwork that slipped through the right channels, while everyone else was distracted by tinsel and catered lunches. With counsel's help, we filed what's called a TCR, a tip complaint or referral, with the SEC. Dry name, explosive potential. Alongside it went a DOJ submission. 2 different agencies, 2 separate tracks. One for securities fraud, one for potential criminal charges. My black box wasn't just evidence, it was ammunition, and now it was loaded into the system. To cover myself, I set up a failsafe. Every document I had mirrored was backed into a read-only vault stored off-site, timed to auto-release to regulators if my access badge was ever deactivated. If they fired me before I was ready, the package would go out on its own. Meanwhile, I played my role, attended meetings, smiled through forced coaching sessions, pretended to update my PIP progress tracker. HR thought they were bleeding me dry. In reality, they were giving me more rope to hang them with, and then came their final insult. 2 days before Christmas break, I was invited into a conference room for a holiday surprise. Inside, the HR director, the CFO, and a glossy envelope. They slid it across the table with rehearsed smiles. "We'd like you to accept this goodwill package," they said. A token check. An NDA thicker than a novel. The unspoken message was clear. Take the hush money and disappear. I didn't even touch it. Instead, I leaned back, folded my arms, and let them talk. Every word was recorded. Every line of their manipulative sales pitch was saved. That evening, my attorney sent the final supplement to the SEC. Attempted obstruction, intimidation, and concealment. The regulators love that kind of detail. It shows intent. The timing could not have been better. The very next morning, while half the office was packing up for early dismissal and swapping cookies, IT froze. Literally froze. Laptops locked mid-sentence. System alerts pinged across departments. Executives scrambled, whispering about legal inquiries. And then the bomb dropped. Subpoenas. Federal subpoenas. The company tried to keep it quiet, but word spreads fast when compliance officers suddenly sprint down hallways. With clipboards, and IT starts imaging hard drives. By the end of the day, the audit committee had been called into an emergency session. From my desk, I watched the CFO storm past with his phone glued to his ear, face pale as snow. HR disappeared behind closed doors. The CEO canceled his flight to Aspen. It was chaos disguised as business as usual. But the beauty of it, I didn't lift a finger that day. My work was already done. The fuse I'd lit weeks earlier was burning on its own, unstoppable. That night, I left the office for the last time that year. Christmas lights blinked in the lobby, ornaments shining like nothing was wrong. But under the surface, the company was bleeding out, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. I walked past the tree, past the security desk, out into the cold December air, and I smiled. Not because it was over. It wasn't. But because for the first time in months, the silence wasn't heavy. It was electric. The machine had started to move, and now it was only a matter of time. Collapse never comes like an earthquake. It comes like a leak. At first, just a drip you can ignore. Then another. Then another. Until the whole structure caves in. The first cracks appeared the week after Christmas break. Employees returned expecting the usual lull, slow meetings, awkward small talk about New Year's resolutions. Instead, they found auditors camped in the conference rooms. Not the friendly kind with clipboards, but the forensic type. The ones who don't smile. The ones who arrive with bankers' boxes and subpoenas already in hand. The board had hired an outside firm, one of the big four, the kind that charges a fortune per hour just to glance at a spreadsheet. And they weren't here for routine oversight. They were here because the SEC and DOJ had questions, and the company needed to look like it was cooperating. Suddenly, the holiday wellness cost center wasn't a cute line item anymore. It was a crime scene. Auditors pulled transaction logs apart like surgeons. Every midnight approval, every fake vendor, every split invoice laid bare. It didn't take long before the trail pointed exactly where my black box had already led. HR approvals routed through the CFO's login. A fraud loop so sloppy it would have been laughable if it hadn't been so expensive. But the auditors weren't just focused on numbers. They wanted communications, emails, Slack logs, meeting notes. That's when the panic set in. Executives started deleting messages in real time, forgetting that nothing is ever really deleted in enterprise systems. IT flagged it immediately. Compliance flagged it louder. And then the press got a whiff. The first article dropped on a niche financial blog. Headline, Mid-Cap Tech, Firm Faces, Questions over Holiday Bonus Irregularities. A ripple. By the next morning, Bloomberg had picked it up. By afternoon, it was trending on LinkedIn. The phrase holiday wellness became a punchline. Employees began whispering in hallways. Slack channels buzzed with speculation. Some joked about getting their yoga stipends back. Others were angry, furious. People who had been denied promotions, bonuses, even healthcare reimbursements realized they'd been robbed so a handful of executives could line their pockets. Inside the boardroom, things got uglier. The audit committee revolted. Leaks spilled about heated arguments, directors demanding resignations, the CEO insisting everything was a misunderstanding. But the forensic reports didn't lie, and neither did the subpoenas. The HR director cracked first. Her once smug demeanor shattered into frantic tears. When auditors showed her signature on approval logs, time-stamped at hours she wasn't even in the building. She claimed she was following orders. She claimed she didn't understand the system. She claimed anything she thought might save her. But none of it mattered. The CFO fought harder, hired his own attorneys, tried to blame rogue staff. But the Slack messages with his ID, the PDFs with his push-through notes, the option backdating calendar pulled from his private folder, it was all too much. Meanwhile, the CEO tried to control the narrative. He called an all-hands town hall, his voice syrupy, telling employees, "We are cooperating fully, and our culture of integrity remains strong." The chat window filled with emojis, not claps, not thumbs up, just clown faces, hundreds of them. That was the moment I knew the company had lost. Not legally, not financially. Those battles were still unfolding. But morally, spiritually, the people no longer believed in the leadership. And when trust dies, collapse is just a matter of paperwork catching up. By February, regulators were circling like sharks. Banks started whispering about liquidity issues. Customers asked for contract reassurances. The press dug deeper, unearthing old board minutes, pointing out patterns of favoritism that now looked like precursors to fraud. And through it all, I said nothing. I didn't tweet. I didn't leak. I didn't gloat in Slack threads. I just watched. Watched as the machine that once tried to crush me buckled under its own corruption. Watched as executives scrambled to preserve reputations, while the very culture they'd weaponized turned against them. It was slow. It was painful. It was beautiful. Because sometimes revenge isn't about one explosive moment. Sometimes it's about watching rot eat the foundation until the walls collapse on their own. The collapse was ugly, but the turn was surgical. By March, the company was radioactive. Clients were nervous, investors were spooked, and employees were updating resume en masse. The stock price slipped like ice on asphalt. That's when the whispers of a white knight started. Enter the acquirer. A bigger competitor, smelling blood in the water, swooped in with an offer. Not a generous one, more like a fire sale wrapped in legal strings. But for the board, it was salvation. A forced acquisition meant they could argue they'd preserved shareholder value. In reality, it meant they'd lost control of the wheel. The terms were brutal. The acquiring firm demanded a full clean-out. CEO gone, CFO gone, HR director gone, entire compliance and audit functions rebuilt from scratch, and the kicker? A cooperation clause with regulators, meaning every ugly detail had to be laid bare in writing for the SEC and DOJ. That's when the settlements began. The DOJ announced fines for wire fraud, conspiracy, and falsified reporting. The SEC followed with charges of securities fraud and internal control failures. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of millions in penalties, clawbacks, and remediation funds. And then came my part. You see, whistleblower laws aren't just theoretical. They exist for exactly this kind of case. Under SEC rules, if you provide original, critical information that leads to an enforcement action with sanctions above a certain threshold, you're entitled to a percentage of the recovery. Not pennies. Percentages. Real money. When the final numbers landed, the penalties crossed into billions, and my black box was cited in the SEC's filing as substantial original evidence. That meant I qualified. The award committee doesn't move fast. There were months of review, lawyers, questions, But when the decision came, it was clear. Between SEC whistleblower awards and a carefully structured shareholder derivative action I had seeded through counsel, my cut landed just under $120 million. I'll never forget Wire Day. I was sitting at my kitchen table again, the same place I'd once stared at spreadsheets in silence, wondering if I was insane to take on an empire. The city was buzzing outside, spring finally breaking winter's grip. My attorney called. "It's done," he said. "Check your account." I logged in, and there it was. 9 figures. More money than my entire department had earned in a decade. More money than the CEO had siphoned for himself. Enough to change my life and plenty of others. I didn't pop champagne. I didn't buy a yacht. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, the weight of it pressing down on me. Because this wasn't just about money. It was validation. Proof that I hadn't been crazy, hadn't been paranoid, hadn't been tilting at windmills. The system had listened. The evidence had spoken. And the same machine that tried to destroy me had written my check. The best part? I didn't keep it all. I set up a severance trust for non-executive employees, people who'd been shafted year after year, while HR and the C-suite fattened themselves. It wasn't charity. It was justice. For once, the bonus pool went to the people who actually earned it. As for me, I walked past that same lobby security desk one last time, coffee in hand, no badge clipped to my jacket. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because when you've turned silence into $120 million, there's no reason to. After the smoke cleared, the real fallout began. The CEO, the same man who had stood by the Christmas tree and smirked as HR unwrapped their bonuses, was banned, officially. The SEC barred him from serving as an officer or director of any public company. His name, once plastered across business magazines as a visionary leader, now appeared in headlines as shorthand for greed and failure. He went from Aspen chalets to legal depositions, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. The CFO didn't fare much better. His side-channel notes, his midnight logins, his push-through HR PDF, they weren't just embarrassing, they were incriminating. Regulators clawed back his stock grants, stripped his options, and left him with fines so heavy he had to liquidate assets just to cover legal bills. From Maseratis to minivans in less than a year. And HR, the director who had smiled as she slid my PIP across the table, the one who thought she held my future in her hands, her appreciation packages became Exhibit A in the fraud case. She lost not only her job, but every bonus she had ever taken through the scheme. The clawbacks left her owing more than she had saved. Karma has a way of balancing ledgers, but this isn't about them. It never really was. It was about what came next. With $120 million, I could have vanished, moved to an island, disappeared into luxury, never thought about corporate life again. But I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to build. So I founded a company of my own, not another finance shop, not another soulless machine, an integrity tech startup designed to give employees the tools I wished I'd had, anonymous reporting systems that actually worked, AI-powered audits that could sniff out fraud before it metastasized, compliance dashboards that made transparency the default, not the exception. And when it came time to hire, I didn't look at resumes for Ivy League polish or buzzword compliance. I hired the analysts who had pulled 80-hour weeks without recognition, the engineers who had kept systems alive at 3 a.m., the people who had been told you don't fit the culture because they refused to bow. I paid them fairly. I gave them bonuses that matched their work, not their proximity to power. And when Christmas rolled around, I didn't hand out boxes with NDAs attached. I handed out envelopes with checks that made jaws drop. And not a single one was siphoned from a fraudulent pool. The irony wasn't lost on me. A year earlier, I'd stood in a lobby decorated with a massive tree, watching HR unwrap packages meant to humiliate the rest of us. Now, I stood in a modest office, string lights twinkling, handing out envelopes that made people cry tears of joy. The cycle had flipped, and maybe that's the real lesson. Revenge doesn't have to end with destruction. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is rebuilding something better in the ashes of what tried to break you. On Christmas Eve, I sat alone in my apartment with the lights low, city glowing outside. My phone buzzed with messages from former colleagues. Thank yous. Stories of how the severance trust I'd funded had helped them pay rent, cover medical bills, finally breathe. I thought back to the moment it all began, sitting in that town hall, watching HR unwrap their packages, listening to the CEO talk about culture while he starved the very people who kept his empire alive. They gave me nothing, not a bonus, not recognition, not even respect, and in return I gave them consequences.